There comes a time where you just have to say, to an individual, it's really time to grow up. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I'm hearing a lot of people just, talking about a few things, and not to say they're false. I don't like to say anybody's information is false. To them, it's truth. And because it's coming from them, it's truth. And whatever they listen to and they categorize as truth is because they're resonating on that level. But in actuality, in order for truth to exist, there has to be some type of lie in existence. No different than, in order for there to be light, there has to be dark. So out of darkness comes light, right? And when you look at it from this spectrum of things, right? Everything just works. Everything's just working together, right? In order for there to be a proper chemistry, of course, there's man and woman. Of course, you can still look at it from a deeper level, saying negative energy. There has to be that positive energy for there to even be a chemistry. Okay? So in order for you to experience love, you have to actually experience hate. In order for you to experience life, there has to be death. Okay? But we're always polarized to one side. And then we put things in boxes saying one thing is bad and one thing is good. See, I'm looking at something where we use these spells of words without us really paying attention to the things that we're actually saying. Okay? Like I could hear politicians saying, we're fighting for the hearts and souls of Americans. And when you hear that, okay, you're there and you're clapping, right? Which even clapping is very, very powerful in and of itself. Just the same way when you hold your hands like this in prayer, it's also very, very powerful. For one, okay, you're putting a chemistry intact here as far as your feminine and masculine, plus you have every single organ of your body, all right, which we call reflexology, right at the palm of your hands. And you are actually now not even just feminine and masculine from one side, but one hand is masculine, one side is feminine. And you put your hands together, okay, and you are directing and being conducive to a certain energy, okay? And this is if you know how to properly channel and harness this to your advantage. But now check this out. You can also hear or see, for example, in the dollar bill or in your money, it says, in God we trust. All right. Now, when you see this, you'll start to look at this as the religious definition of God. But in actuality, who's printing the money for you? Whoever's printing the money for you is the one that you are saying, in God we trust. The same way you have many different levels of God. When you're a child, your parents are God. All right. You believe and trust in them. They provide for you, give you encouragement, unless they're just toxic and breaking you down. But God can also break you down and build you back up, right? Or they can say it's a traumatizing experience with certain parents, but then again, your experience with God may have been a traumatizing experience, but it just depends where you're at mentally. But when you look at, for example, money is energy. I mean, when I have money in my pocket, I walk tall, I'm more confident, I have a certain level of energy that than if I didn't have that money in my pocket. I would feel a little bit more insecure. I wouldn't be so outgoing. I wouldn't be so charitable. I wouldn't be so, that feeling. But where did that feeling come from to begin with? That money in my pocket. In order for me to acquire that money, I have to have a certain consciousness. It's a consciousness, okay? So I'm gonna call you right back. So it's a consciousness, right? So it's an abundance consciousness or a poverty consciousness. So when we look at, for example, like Christ and whatnot, and when we start to look at, all these movements that we have outside of ourselves, all right, that we start to say we are, like vegans, or let's say awarenesses and whatnot, or they're not really stemmed or rooted out of love. All right, they're just the same way you polarize to one side, you have an opposing opposite end, rather than sitting as, let's say if you have a positive and negative charge, you got that neutral charge to ground that energy. So you basically polarizing, you entertain more of this duality matrix, okay? And there's nothing wrong with it, because you have to have an experience in duality. But the Bible says you're in the world but not of it. Okay? When we want to follow these scriptures and whatnot. But God is authority, is the charge. But when you look at it, for example, if now like I grow up now and I start to talk about Christ, right? The reason I even mentioned this whole love thing, this is why they say love is the answer to everything. Like, when you have God in your life, or God truly in your heart, it's a Christ consciousness, right? So you start to, in your perception about life, you definitely treat your neighbor as you would yourself, but you're incorporating science and spirituality. You can see, even from a quantum level, which we have quantum science or quantum mechanics that you could delve into, which somebody who's not in Christ consciousness would just look at that as just another science, or just basically a theory. That's why they call it the observer theory, right? But the only reason it's an observer theory is because you're looking at it from your limited perception of human, okay? You ever hear somebody say, get into the spirit of Christmas, because the environment, it's the season of Christmas, right? And some people are not in the spirit, so they tell you, get into the spirit of Christmas. Why do they say get into the spirit of Christmas, right? That means your environment they're trying to make you conducive to your environment. But at the end of the day, you created that environment to begin with. And if it's there and you don't feel like you're in your right place, it's because you don't know yourself. You created that environment, and if you feel out of place, you're creating out of chaos, and you're not making the order out of that chaos, right? So now, when you start to hear, for example, people say born again of the spirit, all right? Well, the spirit is basically the space that you're in, your environment that you're observing. That's your spirit, your space that you're inhabiting. You see the world for how you are, not for how it is, okay? And I'm going to get into different topics when it comes down to men nowadays saying there's no good women out there. Oh, there's very good women out there. There's very, very good women out there. It's that your awareness is in the wrong place. So you're only highlighting the ones that are not good. So when you want to start to see the right women in your life, that would require you changing yourself, changing your perception, and the right women will start to present themselves in your life. I'm going to get into that topic when it comes down to no fapping and whatnot. So there are good women out there. There's plenty of good women out there. But the whole thing is the awareness part. See, even when people have diseases, and all these things I'm talking about, I'm just talking surface level, but I'm going to get into it in a deeper topic in videos to come. All right. Even people with diseases, right? These bad ideas we call diseases. Like, let's say diabetes, right? If you have diabetes and you try to, and I don't impose my, let's say, my way of doing things to people, but if they ask me questions, then I'm going to help them out accordingly. But some people, even in that case, don't even want to hear it, because who do they trust in? Their doctors. So their doctors are God, right? Because they put all their faith in doctors. So everybody religifies things. But the whole thing is that these people wear these diseases on their sleeve like a badge, where when you try to help them or give them an alternative method, because obviously whatever the fuck they've been doing doesn't work, or it's suppressing a symptom, but how about curing the disease? You know, if they say Christ is a healer, right? Then obviously you would have to embody Christ consciousness to be able to heal others, but also the person outside of you would have to also really have a Christ consciousness. Kind of like blocking abundance, let's say. Let's say if, like when I talked about when I was in California, when I'm in California, I started to feel and act differently because the environment was influencing me, right? And I was going by a feeling, right? Now, if I'm in a poverty state, let's say, and I'm there miserable, I'm not a victim to that environment. I'm just on autopilot. I picked up my environment from the ages of 1 through 7 when I was a child because I was absorbing everything. My conscious mind wasn't online. Like if I put somebody under hypnosis, which I'm a certified hypnotist, I'm a hypnotherapist. Now, if I put somebody under and they base, and I break down that conscious mind and I access the subconscious mind, and we want to go back in time to a specific point, that person can tell me the time, the exact date, the amount of people that were there, what was said, any little thing in the background that the conscious mind wouldn't have picked up, the conscious mind picked all that up because the conscious mind absorbed all that environment, right? But the conscious mind is limited. So the subconscious mind picked all that up. So let's say, for example, if I'm in a poverty state, right? This is why these spiritual people will tell you, oh, no thinking. And I'm going to get into another video on that. But sometimes this is the thinking part that is very important that you need to actually practice. When you're in an environment that's not to your liking, you created it. There's no such thing as victim mentality. You shouldn't be in a victim mentality because you created it. But once you become aware, all right, what do? Now you're thinking, right? You start to think, and then what you do is you change the program. Now, it's going to feel uncomfortable in the beginning to change programming of whatever you're not used to doing, right? But this is where the word discipline comes in. The word discipline came from the word disciples. Jesus had 12 disciples. So what are your virtues and principles moving forward from this point on to change your environment? So if I'm in an environment that's not conducive to me, I think now, and I can start to, with awareness, change the programming, right? And let's say, for example, you get into an environment, like now you're in an abundant environment, you may even feel out of place there. But what do? You don't have to go there and spend money. But the fact that you're involved, or at least participating in the environment, in the energy, it rubs off on you. Because I said I went to California and it rubbed off on me. I started to walk differently. First of all, I was wearing $2,000 shoes. My outfit was probably like $1,500. You know what I'm saying? And I'm driving, $250,000 to $1 million cars. Supercars. I mean, I didn't necessarily have to spend the amount of money they were doing, but the fact that I was feeling differently. You don't think that that's me being born again of the spirit, which is my space that I decided to partake or entertain in? This is why networking is important. It happened to be where it was perfectly aligned for me because my best friends happen to be millionaires. So it's beautiful. It works out perfectly for me, right? But the whole thing is, I also designed that I was supposed to be there at that specific point in time, right? Now, there's different ways where people can say, well, that person's a millionaire, or that person has access to $1 million. Like, there's a big difference there. Who has access to millions versus somebody saying they are a millionaire? But if somebody gives you $1 million, you need to become a millionaire. If not, you won't know what to do with that energy, which is the physical energy, right? But where did that physical energy come from? It requires you to have a certain abundant consciousness to be able to manage your physical realm. And this is where we talk about angels and demons. The angles of light being your levels of information outside of you. So let's say, for example, you have control over your angels. You have control over your demons afterwards. The demons are what's the energy in the physical realm that you can ground into this existence. But it's no different than just looking at it as the sun being the feminine, the masculine energy in action, basically making order out of the chaos of the earth, which is the feminine. Which I'm going to get into in other videos when it comes down to your lower root chakra and your sacral plexus chakra, okay? And what planets govern those, and then the organs that are basically co-governing those. And then we start to talk about the energies that were inhabited for some strange reason, because we could look at the nucleus, right, of an atom, or let's say, for example, we could look at we call that the brain, right? But if you take that brain out, how is it that it keeps surviving? It keeps thriving, right? Because that's not really the brain. It's actually the gonads. But it doesn't mean that it necessarily wasn't a brain. It's still a brain. No different than your lower extremities. You could live without them. But that's also a brain. You think from that space, right? You can think from... That's why people, if they're chasing their dick, I mean, what the fuck is happening? They're in a lustful fucking space. Somebody could be way too intellectual and they're just talking straight from intellect. Somebody can be talking from their heart space, right? But all has to be in harmony, working together, because somebody could be just talking, regurgitating, or just speaking using their throat chakra, right? But that's the means of communication we depend on here. But where is it tying from? Is it coming from the heart space? Is it coming out? Because some people, that's why people say, yo, he's talking out of his ass. He's talking from the lower extremities, the animalistic nature. There's a lot of vegans that fight for animals and say, we are the voice of the voiceless. But they do not have a communication with these animals. They do not. And I'm going to get into deeper videos as far as cause and effect. And, if anybody who's vegan wants to have a discussion with me, I'm more than open-minded and willing to do so. And in fact, I want to be open to new ideas. If you're going to give me something that would actually make me think in a different way, I would be very, very grateful. But when I saw Dominion, when I saw all these documentaries about these animals getting tortured and whatnot, I saw people. That's what I saw. But then, oh, well, if you saw people, then why would you go and hurt them? I mean, I'm not necessarily doing anything. Yet, somebody's saying that me going to the supermarket or buying it, I'm paying for it, which means that I'm actually the one doing it, right? I'm going to get into another video on that. I'm keeping all this for records because I will be making further videos on this. But if you really observe this whole thing, what are the chances that you came here as who you are right now in this moment in time? If you really think about it, who else has dominion over you? Because if you look at animals, it's obvious that we would have dominion over these animals, right? Because we are a higher evolved species than the animal, no matter what. But sometimes we think that we're only more evolved because we're able to intellectually speak language, problem solve. There's different levels of intelligence. That's the whole thing. And I'm going to get into that too. Just like people talk about sentience, is there a level to sentience? You could look at the simplest animal to the largest animal. Okay? We could talk about that too. Now, as far as in God we trust, right? What God are you talking about? Because a lot of people start to say Jesus and God, and then I can see Christ, Jesus, He's us. I can see that. I can see the consciousness, why I would follow that abundance consciousness, seeing the connectiveness in others, seeing everything from the single eye. So the body fills with light. Right? See, there's the thing, there's the problem though. A lot of people, they'll go on camera. And sometimes there's people who actually message me and say, hey, how come you don't make more videos? You know, I haven't seen a video from you in over a month. For one, I'm doing a lot of things outside of YouTube. Also, just like everybody else, there's moments where I fight my own demons. But does that necessarily mean that I want to go on camera and just do a video just because it's the YouTube won't push your videos unless you're more active on YouTube, right? So that forces people to have to pump out videos. But then, listen, pay very close attention to the YouTubers you listen to. They're complaining a lot of complaining, a lot of bitching, a lot of drama, a lot of shit that really isn't serving you, okay? And they're only going to speak about what they're about. This is why they're on camera. Now, if they're in their shadow aspect expressing all this, okay, you're consuming that and you are what you eat. And what's funny is that sometimes people think that a lot of intellect sometimes causes more sorrow. And in actuality, is the person you're listening to, you're intaking that person's insides to some extent. So your life may be one way, it may be more chaotic after listening to one individual, because that person's expressing the shadow aspects of themselves. And because a lot of people have this worship mentality, right? They always have to have something to look up to and worship. They worship YouTubers. And because they in that YouTuber trust so much, they start experiencing that person's shadow aspect that they expressed on camera. And they don't know where that came from or why it happened. Okay? A lot of people say that they're guided by the Spirit or by God and whatnot. There's also a very fine line between knowing what you're actually saying is God outside of you, right? And you actually manifesting it yourself. See, whenever I do something and I want to accomplish it wholeheartedly, it has to start from me having a confidence and faith in myself that I can do it. And that's me bringing God into my space. Okay? And that's authority. Like the God of the water, the God of the air, the God of fire, the God of whatever. It's the God because it's a God of something. It's authority over something. Now, what has dominion over humans? Just humans in general. Forget like the elite and the whatever. Forget all that. Who has dominion over the actual human being? Nobody. Unless we want to talk about aliens. Right? I'm going to get into another video on that one because that'll be a long topic. But, and that's a very, very interesting topic when it comes to dominion over these things. See, dominion over the planet and the animals is you having dominion, and I'm going to end it on this, is you having dominion over your root chakra. Okay? That's what it's about. Your animalistic self. See, there's a lot of people, let's say people in poverty. Do you notice how these people are the ones that have the most babies? Why is that? It's animalistic. Now, when somebody's in a different state, let's say, for example, they're making money and whatnot, that's another state. But they tend to have less babies, right? They don't have the time to take care of babies, but they're more into something else that's making them money. And then you got the spiritual people. You got different categories of things. But somebody who has babies irresponsibly, okay, I look at that as an animalistic. Because you don't want to bring a child into this existence, especially if you're aware that you're in a poverty state. And I see this in videos where people start to, send charity to these people and whatnot. And these people have like 20 babies on camera. And what does that look like? That's animalistic, because what do animals do in nature? All they want to do is reproduce. I had to neuter all my cats and spay the cats that are in my garden. If not, they'll just fucking have like 100 babies by next year. So I had to cut their reproductive organs or send them to the vet to get that done, right? So the same way they're able to strive and survive, right? Humans don't need to do that. But what is the way the human should do it is having the control over the animalistic nature without having to cut those off. Because if you cut that off, right, your vitality is very important to manifest, create. Do you get what I'm saying? All your energy comes from those lower centers. I would never want to cut those off. And in fact, the governing planet being Saturn and Mars, and there's actual information online that can actually, even Jordan Maxwell spoke about this at one point, which I'll get into another video on it, where Saturn was once the original sun. But then we have this sun over here, and we made a story about the whole Christ thing and whatnot. But we're in a realm right now. And that Christ, whatever we're looking at as the sun, or whatever stories we're hearing about Christ, or any of that, it's all us. That's what it is. It's talking about us. If you start internalizing this, you won't have any room for victim mentality, pointing fingers. But you will also start to even have debates with people in a way where it would actually be building, rather than you intentionally go out and try to crush somebody in a debate. The debate would actually be building, because it's rooted out of love and not out of ego, where my intention is to flare and flex my knowledge and tear the other person down by character attacking. There's the difference. Sometimes it takes a little growing up to do, huh? I had to do a lot of growing up by myself, but hey, it's never too late. I'm going to make more videos. Everything I spoke about here, I'm going to go deep in topic. I consider this a very important video, and don't forget, I'm making these videos for myself. So this is basically me talking to myself. Technically, I'm talking to myself on camera, and I'm going to put it out public. So if you listen to it, then it was for you, because it's important. And if it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. But if you do like it, like, share, and subscribe. That does help my channel out, and we will talk soon.